Have you ever tried to set boundaries with your family around your money, or worse, felt like you couldn't set boundaries with them because it almost felt like you were supposed to help your family? Well, in this interview, we're talking about the sandwich generation, where you're trying to raise kids, you're trying to start your own family, and you also have your parents or grandparents or aunts and uncles that are expecting you to also contribute to them. In this conversation, we're talking about how to set boundaries and how to have those really hard conversations so that it's not just that sort of crabs in a barrel where we all struggle together, but it's actually the ability to continue to grow, to build generational wealth, and to be the change in your family so that it's not just everybody struggling together. Erica is one of 70 financial therapists in the country, and so you are in great hands in this video. As you're watching, let us know if you have questions. I read every single comment, and I'm excited to hear what you think. Let's dive in. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Legacy Show. So today we have Erica Waserman, who is a financial therapist, and we're going to talk so much more about what exactly that means and how that plays into our lives. And the conversation for today is really focused around what we call the sandwich generation. So you're taking care of your kids, and you also have aging parents or grandparents that you're responsible for, and juggling all of the different sort of plates that come along with that. So Erica, we're super excited to have you here today. Can you start by telling us just a little bit about how you got into this space?
Yeah, absolutely. I get that question a lot. What are you? I haven't heard of a financial therapist before. And so for me, life's a roller coaster, probably like you and all of your listeners. It's not a straight line. I've never met anybody who has a straight line. I have you?
I think life would be extremely boring if it was just a straight line. It's the ups and downs that make life interesting, even though sometimes it's not as positive or as uplifting as we want it to be. It's those things that make us stronger. So I don't think I have either.
Yeah, exactly. And so my life hasn't been a straight line either. So I got a degree at University of Florida with a finance degree and went and worked in corporate America. And then after a decade of doing that and getting married and moving overseas, I was able to live in Asia for 3 years, doing consulting, having my first baby, pregnant with my second, came home and shifted careers again and started working with entrepreneurs because I wanted the flexibility of raising a family versus corporate hours. So I had 3 kids in 3 years, and I was divorced in the fourth, and also left corporate America. So lots of shifting happening there. I moved back to South Florida. I had 3 kids under the age of 4. Several years later, I lost my father. And he was my financial accountability partner. And like I said, I was a finance major. I loved math, and he and I bonded over it. And so when he passed away, I knew where the information was and why he made some of the decisions. My parents were a traditional marriage, and my mom knew where the binder was, but maybe not necessarily some of the whys behind it. And I just told you my quick roller coaster of life in less than a minute. And I was always in the driver's seat with my relationship with money. And as I've gone through, I've looked around, and a lot of people haven't made those transitions as easy because they're not as comfortable and confident in the relationship with money because nobody teaches us about money. And so when I discovered financial therapy, I went and got a graduate certificate from Kansas State in financial therapy, and then went and got certified through the Financial Therapy Association. Right now, I'm one of 70 financial therapists that are certified to talk about this conversation. So I, as you can tell, totally passionate about what I do because so much of life happens, as you talked about the sandwich generation, right? You're raising your kids, you're trying to figure out how to financially support a family, but then you might have aging parents that need you and or need you to take over their finances as well. And it's very stressful if you don't have a confident relationship with money, which, how do you get that?
Absolutely. So to take that back a second here, because I think there's so much of what you said that's so important. So going into the fact that your dad was your financial accountability partner, I can tell you, for example, my mom, when she was growing up, her parents were like, we don't talk about money. It's not a conversation that we're going to have. And so like my parents were not confident in planning for it because that was not something that they were raised with. And I think we're seeing the sort of the impact of that, where it's, okay, we don't want to have these conversations, but the result of not having those conversations is a lack of education and poor relationships because unfortunately, living in a capitalistic society, we attach a lot of our sort of self-identity to money, which we definitely shouldn't. But if we're being honest with ourselves, that ends up being the case. And so I think this sort of marriage between finance and therapy is so interesting. So can we talk a little bit more about What does that look like? Like, how is that different than working with a therapist or working with a financial advisor? Like, where's the sort of overlap in that?
Yeah, I want to take a step back for a second because you mentioned not talking about money. And in a recent survey, 2,000 Americans were polled, 81%. So 81 out of 100 people said they were taught not to talk about money, but didn't know why.
Not
So, and so now we have something that's part of our wellness wheel, right? Nutrition, education, spirituality, relationships, occupation, finances is all on that wheel. And when one of them's off balance, it leads to stress and anxiety. So you have outlets and conversations and places to talk about nutrition, exercise, spirituality, relationships. You call your best friend, you call your therapist, you call your religious advisor. In nutrition, you share recipes. Money, we're not supposed to talk about. So how can we get better at something if we don't have an outlet to talk about it?
That is
And
mind blowing. I'm not surprised, but like to hear the statistic on that is insane, and that's really unfortunate. I literally just got done recording a reel about how Tom Brady and Giselle, so we talk a lot about what we can learn from pop culture and celebrity relationships and their estates, and for them their divorce took 1 day and they have almost $750 million in assets. It took 1 day for them to file and finalize, and a big part of it was because they had a prenup. And so going through, and I know this is a different conversation, but what my big takeaway from that was, we have such a, I don't know, such an interesting aversion to talking about anything having to do with financial planning for the future. Like, we don't like to talk about prenups. We don't like to talk about financial planning. We don't like to talk about retirement planning. We don't like to talk about life insurance, end of life care, like long-term care. So it's so interesting that these are all things that we're probably going to need, and yet it's nope, don't talk about it. Taboo.
it's taboo because people are ashamed of it
Yes.
because they don't know. And listen, I don't know how to play hockey. Nobody ever taught me. I've seen it on TV. I've ice skated a couple of times. How am I supposed to know to play hockey? So we don't teach financial relationships or even how to balance a checkbook, even if or finances in general, right?
Yeah.
So how are you supposed to learn this? It's not in school. And our parents are learning, and I'll tell you how you get your financial beliefs in a minute, but our parents are doing the best they can. And unless we take it on ourselves to learn, which, by the way, if I just went outside with a hockey stick, how good am I going to get?
Probably not that great at the beginning, and that's okay. That's something that you didn't have the skills for. And I think that's how
Until I hired coaches, until I studied film and still put hours and hours of practice. Your
Yeah.
relationship with money is the same way. And we get our money relationships from three major areas. The first is our background. How you said your parents had money, but they didn't talk about it. So that's what you learned.
Mhm.
Some people learn the man only makes the decision. Some people learn that you fight over money, that you don't talk about it, that credit card debt is normalized.
Yeah.
That's their background. Then you have religion. Money is greed.
Yes.
Uh,
Money is the
you,
root of all evil.
money won't buy you happiness. Then, or you give a certain percent to charity.
Right.
And the third is your experience. So if you have a positive experience doing something, you're going to want to do it again. And now we're talking about the sandwich generation, you having kids and your parents, is at some point you blended families with maybe a partner, and your partner are seeing things different. So let's talk about taking care of your elders. In some cultures, it's a financial obligation culturally to take care of your parents. In other cultures, it's not. So depending on who you partner with, that's a big rub before you even start. And here's the interesting thing. How many months do you think it takes to say I love you in a relationship?
So they'll say, I don't know, 4, 5. I don't know. I'm guessing.
Be honest, 5 months is
Okay.
the average.
Okay.
How
Cool.
many months, years does it take to share your financial information? Your salary, your debt, your credit score.
I don't know, probably a year and a half, 2 years until you get engaged. I don't know.
So the average is 9. And again, I ask this question all the time and I get everything from first date to never. My husband still doesn't know, right? And you're in love with this person. but your financial background, religion, and experiences are probably different. And it's something that you're not talking about till much later in the relationship, which is why finances is one of the biggest things that people fight over after and tied with like infidelity.
Mhm.
So back to your question of how do you work with a financial therapist? That's where I come in. I dig in under the why. So why is it important to you to support your parents? Why is it important maybe to your partner or to a sibling, right? Because we need to have these conversations because expectations are laid and expectations are just predefined disappointments. It's important for you to express your why so that people around you can support you.
I love that. Money specifically is the thing that I think is so deep rooted into us that we have therapists for other things. We have, like you mentioned, coaches for business, but when it comes to our money, it's, oh, I'll talk about everything else except for that. And I love the fact that I feel like I'm in such great company having this conversation because this is such an important piece of what we've never really focused on. And now we need to. So when it comes to someone like, okay, I get that I probably need a financial therapist, even though I'm a little nervous about it. And now I'm in the situation where I have aging parents and I'm starting to worry about being able to take care of them over the long term. So whether they're retiring or already retired, what are some of the things that you've seen for families really work in balancing all the different plates there?
It's a great question, and it's unique to each person. So I really have to say that it goes back to not judging what others are able to do. And that's really going to be important. Just pause there for a second and don't judge based on what other people around you are doing or not doing for their parents. You have to look at what you can do and also what the needs are for your family. So that's going to be the first important conversation to have is find out from your family, from your parents, what do they need? Do they need financial, is it dollars? Do they need time? Do they need access to medicine or doctors or picking up prescriptions? Like, what do they
Housing.
actually need versus what you think they need?
Love it.
Then look at a brainstorm. Do a structured brainstorm with your family members. If it's taking time off of work to take them to the doctors, set up a rotation schedule or find somebody who works at off hours. Make sure that their needs are being met, but there's other ways of doing it than putting everything on yourself. So find ways to brainstorm the solution. And if it's financial needs, look at yourself. You got to keep the life vest around you too. So don't overgive and put yourself in debt because then you're harming your next generation as well. Maybe there's another solution for what they're looking to do that requires less money, but maybe more time. And so that's really going to be important is get specific on what their needs actually are versus your assumptions.
So there's two things that you brought up that I really want to focus on here. The first is you brought up judgment. And so I would imagine that the way that we judge others based on what we think we should be doing, as well as worrying about what other people think about us when we're going through these things, is probably a large part of your conversations. Would that be pretty accurate?
Oh, that's exactly what I see a lot of because our decisions are made 90% are emotional, 10% are logical. So the emotions around us are based on what we see, feel, and have experienced. So if we're seeing things happen, maybe it's family members taking their grandkids on vacation, and so you're feeling that's what you should expect, right? And you're holding your parents up to a different standard. They're not going to maybe be able to obtain that. So you're putting false expectations on them that they're never going to obtain. So it's really important to take a look in to see what is actually happening and limit the comparing. We're humans, it happens, but try and limit the comparing and see how your bucket is being filled because it might be filled in different ways.
Have you ever read the book Give and Take by Adam Grant?
No, I haven't.
Oh my God. So this is one that like changed my life, changed my view on everything. And it's written by a college professor at the Wharton School of Business at the University of Pennsylvania. And the book is all about how It's the difference between givers, takers, and matchers. And what he talks about in the book is, and this is going back to what you mentioned about not going into debt to take care of other people. We know that there's a very popular conversation right now around boundaries. And yet, what this particular book talks about is there's two types of givers that we don't usually talk about. The first is what they call your I forget what the first, something about being basically just a limitless giver. Like you give to the point of exhaustion. And when we look at on the totem pole, takers are the ones who struggle the most because everything is transactional. And then second is actually the people who just give to the point of exhaustion because they can never get themselves to a place of stability. And then the next one is matchers. So people who are like, I'll scratch your back if you scratch mine type of people. And the last one is what he calls an otherish giver. And it's someone who has boundaries around their giving. They give freely around the things that align with their passions and their vision and their mission, but they are comfortable saying no to the things that cross over their boundaries, and cannot strongly recommend it enough. It is an incredible read, and I read it maybe 5 or 6 years ago, and I still talk about it regularly today. So
I'm definitely going to have to add that to my list because
and even for your clients too, like I would imagine that's an awesome one.
So yeah, and that's one of the things I work on is boundary setting, because let's go back to the wellness wheel. We have boundaries on what we eat. You're not going to sit and eat a cake every day. You have a boundary of like, I'm going to have dessert or I'm going to have a piece of cake. What financial boundaries do you have for yourself even?
Definitely.
And I don't mean it in a negative way. Like I have a thing called a sunshine fund, which is like the fun to go get like a pedicure, to buy your friend flowers, who's having a bad day. It's important to have boundaries on all aspects of your life and know how much you can give. I have a client whose niece came to him. He didn't have kids. The niece came to him. She was in her mid-20s and said, hey, I need $1,000 to help with rent this month. And he gave it to her. And then the next month she showed up on his doorstep and said, hey, by the way, I need another 1,000 this month. I'm short on rent. And he gave it to her. And then all of a sudden, it's back to that unlimited giver that you were talking about, is he's like, now every month she just expects me to pay $1,000 of her rent because he never set up a boundary. And the boundary could be something like, listen, I have $5,000 earmarked for you to help you in emergencies. Do you want to use this now? Or would you like to take 1,000 now and save another 1,000 for later in your life? Because with money, we're not hearing these conversations happen proactively. We're not seeing them happen because everything's done hush. So how would somebody know to set up a financial boundary like that with family members?
It's so interesting how the way that you present that is not a yes or no. And I think that's what a lot of us look at as boundaries around, especially money. Sorry, no, I can't do that. That's, you're crossing over a boundary, rather than saying, and going back to the book, Give and Take, he talks about expanding the pie. And this is a lot of what otherish givers do, is they don't look at, okay, this is all that's available. They look at what are ways that we can creatively expand the pie. And so to your point, I have $5,000 for you. Do you want to use that now, or do you want that to be used for a later time? Like, you now put it back in the other person's court to say, okay, like, it's there for me if I need it, but do I actually need it right now? And so I love how you just walked us through that example.
Yeah. And another example is I have a client whose family members often ask for money. And culturally, that's the norm for her, is I need a couple hundred here. Can I have a couple of hundred here? And she has come up with a boundary that if you need money, I have housework for you to do. So
Interesting. Okay.
I will give you the $200 that you need, or the $500 or whatever you're knocking on my door for, but I need that room painted. I
Yes.
need my garage cleaned out. So people ask me less for money and they go to other people that will just give them the money. But
Yeah.
for me, money has energy. And so if it's something that you can't provide for yourself and you're asking for me to take away from something that I need, because that that $500 is no longer going to the investment of yourself or for your future or for your kids, it comes at a cost, and you have to figure out what that is for you.
Absolutely. So we've talked about, to this point, we talked a lot about boundaries. We talked about some of the ways that we can enforce that. We've talked about just the fact that if you say yes to one thing, you're saying no to your generational wealth and being able to take care of yourself and your kids in the future. So can we talk a little bit about when you're dealing with parents or grandparents that are just difficult to deal with when it comes to money?
Yeah. And so the difficult conversations are not happening. And so frustration and resentment are building.
Yes.
No longer, I equate it to a toothache. You have a toothache, you go in, you get a cavity filled, couple $100, and like you're out in an hour. You let that fester, and all of a sudden, it's a root canal, it's thousands of dollars, you lived in pain for 2 years, and it's not pleasant. That whole 2 years and the extra money that you're spending. So the same is with these financial conversations. So that's what we have to get under, and that's what we talk about.
I love that. Okay, so taking that a step further, what is the most important conversation that you're seeing right now in this sort of sandwich generation that's not being had? Because we talked about, yes, difficult parents, but is there anything else that if we really take that a step further, that we can proactively prevent some of these things from happening? Or if it's already gotten to that point, that we just need to rip off the Band-Aid and have the harder conversation?
Yeah, let's look downward, right? Let's look at our kids. They're watching you right now.
Mhm.
They're watching you have or not have financial conversations. They're watching how you spend. They're building their background, their experiences based on you. I'll give you an example. You're in real estate, right? So growing up, I was probably like 7 or 8 years old. My dad is not handy, was in medicine, right? And so he bought a property, an apartment. And I can't tell you, for probably he had it for 2 years, maybe 3. And every day it was a hassle, right? The people weren't paying on time. The toilet was leaking. He had to replace a light bulb. We're talking a light bulb. We're not even talking about major damage, right? But him, the day he sold it, he was super happy. And the messaging that I received was real estate's a bad investment. I became an adult and I looked around and half my friends were like, no, real estate's a great investment. And that's how my family has built generational wealth. And the messaging that I always received was that it was negative. And so our kids are listening and seeing what we're doing. So to help gain their confidence with money is have these open conversations. Also, start looking for your future so you're not putting them in that same situation. That might be long-term care. That might be a life insurance policy. That might be putting together an HSA account for medical bills or anything that's coming up for you so they don't have to drop out of college to come take care of you, right? It's putting those extra things in place and communicating about it, about why you're doing it. Hey guys, we're not going to be going out tonight because I need to do this. And I'll give you a great example for the kids. On a fun note, say you want to go to, I have a client that wants to go to Ireland, right? Because they want to go to their roots, they want to take the trip back and their heritage. They created, like at the churches and the synagogues and the schools, they have a thermometer.
Yeah.
So they have a thermometer at the house. They think the trip's going to cost $10,000. So every time they go to Target, they go to the grocery store and they ask, do we need this or are we putting this towards our trip?
I love it. That is awesome.
And so they come home, and again, you get the kids involved and they color it in, and the mom has to move the money over. So if it's $20 that you saved at Target, move the $20 into the savings account for that new house or for that trip that you want to do. And all of a sudden, the kids are going to start seeing it too.
Mhm.
And then it's showing them how to set goals, how to obtain goals, and to have those conversations.
I love this. It's almost like you're pivoting the conversation around money from being fear-based to being empowering and being uplifting and being something that's no, this can be like restraint can be fun because we're doing it in a way that's bringing everyone into the conversation, not just I'll deal with this, you worry about kid things. And I think this is the coolest thing ever. For the people who are listening, who are like, okay, I resonate with a lot of what we're talking about, and maybe I need to reach out, but I'm not really sure if I'm there yet. What would you tell someone who's on the fence and wondering if they actually need a financial therapist?
Yeah, so I welcome you to come in on my website, yourfinancialtherapist.com. I do a free 15-minute consultation. So it's an opportunity for us to meet, for us to learn to see if we're the right match. I only select key clients that are motivated, that are ready to look into their relationship and proceed forward. So if it's not the right time for you, that's cool. Keep my number handy. But if you're ready to make some shifts with your financial mindset from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset, then reach out to me at info@yourfinancialtherapist.com.
Is there any last sort of tidbit that you would leave our listeners with that we didn't get to talk about yet?
Yeah, the tidbit is that relationships with money take practice. So start small. Start, and also another tip it is, if you're having a conversation, write it on a sticky note what the topic is. Put it between you. So that way when we get off course, right? We don't want to throw the whole kitchen sink into this one conversation. Go back to the sticky note that's in front of you and say, let's focus on this. You can have a parking lot to write some of your other notes down to do another financial meeting,
Yep.
but focus on one topic at a time and having it written in front of you or a picture of the kids or whoever you need to do, focus back on that because it's going to take small multiple conversations to move the ball forward.
Love it. Erica, this was amazing. I think that, like I said, I learned a lot. I hope our listeners learned a lot. I hope that the people who are listening understand that there's a better way to go about money. There's a better way to have these conversations. And if we don't feel prepared or skilled enough to have these conversations on our own, that there are professionals, that it's not just your financial advisor, it's not just your accountant, but there's people who are specifically trained like yourself in being able to have these really difficult conversations. And I think to just add one onto that is just making sure that you're dealing with experts in all areas of your life, and also knowing and asking the questions of who are the experts that you need to deal with, because I think this conversation is going to show a lot of people that like there is such thing as a financial therapist and they didn't know that there needed to be that. And in the same way, like when you're dealing with real estate, dealing with an expert in a specific type of transaction, it's like going to the doctor's office and you like go to your general practitioner and you're like, hey, like I have a brain tumor, I need you to remove it. You probably wouldn't trust your general doctor to do that. So why do we expect our accountant or a CPA or agent to be able to do all of the specialties and do them at a high level? I think that's setting unrealistic expectations. And so I'm really grateful for you taking the time to sit down and talk to us about what all of this looks like and the different ways that financial therapy can really save families, essentially.
Yeah, I'm glad to sit down with you. And this is such a fun conversation. So thanks for having me on today.